is a really awesome experience for us. We really enjoy looking after the various technical interest groups, collaborating technical societies, and special interest groups for Engineering New Zealand. The IT group is quite close to us, and I was just talking to our chief executive, Richard, earlier, and we're talking about how just there is computing in everything, and this area touches all forms of engineering, and it's only becoming more and more important every day. And so this is a really near and dear group to us. And so it's just wonderful to see how many people are online and in the different city centres as well. So thank you so much for coming. With that, I will pass over to Siobhan, who will take us away with the first presentation. Thank you, Siobhan.
Thank you very much, Henry. So I have already introduced myself to the 5 people in the room. So for those online, kia ora koutou. I am Siobhan Lilly. I am an engineer, originally having an electrical engineering degree from Canterbury University, but have now working for Engineering New Zealand in the engineering practice team, and have the pleasure to lead the engineering and AI program. So I have been working over the last, 6 months or so with Ken and Panos, really appreciating the level of expertise they bring to the AI advisory group and our program. So appreciate this opportunity to meet the IT group and just give you an overview of what the program's about, what the AI advisory group do, and where maybe, what do you need from us? Always. So moving on, got a little bit of a timeline here for the program. So basically in 2023, the powers that be at Engineering New Zealand recognised that we really need to make sure that our members are on the bullet train that is AI. So we had the 2023 foundations of the program that we have now. Our first AI Advisory Committee meeting was in November, and at that meeting there was an agreement that Ron Green, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year, would write a study on the implications of AI for engineering in New Zealand. So that study was called Artificial Intelligence, Engineering and the Engineer. I think it was about 160 pages. Ron had interviews with people leading AI and engineering at the time, and it's a pretty impressive paper that was published. So that, together with the AI Advisory Group being put together very early in 2024, led to forming our work program. So our official board sign-off of our engineering and our work program was on the 31st of May, 2024. And since then, we've had our website in place, giving initially pretty limited resources for our members, but just looking at the basics, governance, ethics, starting points. But since then, with the help of our advisory group, we have kind of had a relaunch of our website in about September this year, providing, sorry, just to make sure I keep wandering off, providing a lot more resources. So what I am going, there's a lot of small words there, but actually they're a bit bigger on the screen here, so I could just turn around. So I'm just going to run through where our website is now. Oh, before that, just having a look at the scope of our advisory committee. It's evolved a little bit over time, but we have both academic and industry experts. So we've got representatives from Vic, from Canterbury, from Auckland University, and also AUT. Obviously, Ken there is on the academic side. On the industry experts, we see Becker, Holmes, Bob McDonald, as well as smaller engineering kind of solution companies there. So quite a broad range of experts that come together once a month for our AI Advisory Committee meetings, and you'll see panels there. Alrighty. So what is the aim of our program? Empowering engineers to explore and harness the potential of artificial intelligence, as always, appropriately, responsibly, and ethically. So I kind of very much recognize that within the IT group, you guys are the experts. And the focus of our program is really more for the small guys, small companies, you know, they really have no idea. They've like their spreadsheets, and they know what they're doing and are very apprehensive of using AI. But it maybe don't even know what AI is. We know it's a very broad topic, but we want to kind of start them on their journey and make sure that they have a solid foundation. So just looking at our, what I've done is just taken some extracts from our website so you can just get a feel of the resources that we're providing. Every month we have a newsletter that comes up that's aiming to kind of capture the latest that's happening in AI, also with a New Zealand context and engineering focus. We organise a webinar once a month, and then just give a bit of a beginner's guide and a deployment and ethics quick kit that that people can have a look at if they're first starting out. We've got a couple of workshops and webinars to get people on their go. And what's really important, we've found out for a lot of our members is getting leadership support for embracing AI in the journey, and also a focus we're starting to look at is clients as well. You know, clients can be very apprehensive, and our representative from Mott MacDonald basically said the other day that she'd had a client that said no AI in this project at all. So yeah, so education, bringing everyone along on I know, bring everyone along on the journey is really, really important. And also you can see we've just got our own AI use policy that people can have a look at, and our engineering and AI LinkedIn group. So I'll talk about the LinkedIn group a little further along the way. So when we look at just our more broader offerings, this is a on our landing page as well, we've kind of broken it into about 6. Well, actually, there's a couple more down the bottom, but I left those ones out. Sections here where we're providing resources for our members. I'm just going through them very quickly. So AI and professional practice is a little bit more down the line. What's its role? Some guidance, pretty high-level guidance for integrating the tools. Really important one, we found out that you are not allowed to use any AI standard in any AI tool. AI standard, what are they called? Standards New Zealand say you cannot upload any standard, even kind of scan a copy of it. So yeah, we've got a little bit of guidance on how you might navigate that restriction, or keeping within a legal framework there. Reading between the lines, I think a little bit there for our members. Some starting prompting frameworks, just looking about different capabilities, and yes, a bit of more kind of in-depth guidance. Still pretty high level. Nothing that any one of you guys, you people, would need guidance on. We have 2 courses that are given by Matt Ensor. So Matt has about, I don't know, what do you say, 30 years involvement as an engineer working for Becker, is pretty much a leader in Gen AI in New Zealand. We're quite closely tied now with the AI Forum, and Matt is on the AI committee there. So yep, he does a 1-hour webinar every couple of months, getting practical with Gen AI, and then a full-day workshop exploring the power of Gen AI. So I had a little go at that, and basically by the end of his workshop, you can write your own agents, easier and easier, obviously, as time goes by. He says he constantly has to change up his workshop because everything changes so fast. But hey, principles and just that getting started can be, you know, the most challenging thing. And then it's like, oh wow, you can do that so easy. Yeah. So our webinars and case studies, we have hosted 8 webinars so far. So 6 have been, so these are all obviously available from our website to look at, 6 from industry and 2 panel discussions. So the panel discussions were really interesting, some really kind of concerning questions coming from our members. You know, will AI take my job? You know, what will it look like for me as a professional? So we had a really good panel discussion around that. And the other one was concern about our graduates. So if our graduates are using AI during their degree, relying on it too much, does that mean that they don't have that thinking capacity that they might have had if they didn't use it? So just, you know, we had representatives from Vic and Auckland on that panel, as well as a really recent graduate who, Blake, who's a member of our advisory committee. And Blake was like, yeah, I used it all the time. And hey, that means that now in my job for self-power, I'm telling them how they can improve all of their processes really easily by using AI. So basically a real flip. You know, you want these graduates to be coming in to your organizations and giving you a reality check on how easy it is to improve your processes. So really, really interesting discussions there. So to date, our industry discussions, we've had designing 3D pipe networks, modelling New Zealand with AI and digital twins. I don't know if anyone has seen the work that's done on the New Zealand digital twin. Really, really interesting work there. Unlocking the future of geotechnical engineering with AI. How to safely introduce AI into your engineering practice. Now that one was an industry one. That was a Becker engineer showing a lot of the safeguards that they put in place in their industrial plant and application of AI. And then we started off our very first webinar was just on AI prompt engineering from a Canterbury University lecturer. So that's just a bit of an overview. We have just finished a webinar from CO who are implementing AI in health and safety workplaces. You know, the video capture, the analysing all the way through to recommendations of how to improve health and safety. Showed us some very scary examples of the stupid things people do walking behind forklifts. So that should be up on our website soon. Alrighty, and then just a starter, you know, we've just picked some newsletters and podcasts. Everyone processes things in different ways. So just a selection that people can have a look and decide whether there's anything that really talks to them to keep them up to date with the constant change of AI. And then, of course, we have our appropriate, safe and ethical use section. You know, it's starter for 10 kind of stuff, but really important to have there. And AI governance, we're really relying on what other people have done in this area, particularly the AI Forum. They have some really, really great guidance on AI governance frameworks, as well as the Institute of Directors. They've got some great resources there as well. So in that case, it's like, we're not the experts, but we'll lead you to where you can get some good information. And we've got some really strong partnerships. Again, that's really small information. The AI Forum, I'm a member of the AEC working group, the Architects, Engineers and Construction Working Group. And Engineers Australia, which we need to probably build that relationship a bit more. Obviously, the universities and the Standards and Accreditation Board. So we're talking to all of those people and building the partnerships. So what are we doing at the moment? What's on top at the moment is just getting those monthly webinars sorted and out. Our monthly newsletters. Typically, we in our advisory group meetings, we get a bit of a drop on what is happening and what we can put in the newsletters. I've got that as a task to put the draft newsletter out by Friday. And our LinkedIn group. So currently, we have 125 members of our engineering and AI linked group with pretty minimal interaction. So we just launched it. People signed up, thought, oh, wow, this looks good, and didn't really go anywhere. So that's going to be a focus for us to try and kick that off more in the new year. And as far as the website resources, we're, looking at the fact that people learn in different ways, and many people now don't want to be reading a screed of guidance. So just looking at some little how-to bite-sized videos for those people starting out. And also, I don't know if you're aware of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, international organisation, obviously, but they have a mandatory standard on the responsible use of AI it came out in September. It will be mandatory in March, and basically every surveyor who's a member of RICS will have to do quite a bit of communication with the clients on what AI they're using, how they're using it, why they're using it, and also a minimum education set out there. So that's kind of quite a leading piece of work on mandatory. I don't know, New Zealand isn't really going down the mandatory. No, I can see a shake of the head. No, that's what I mean, that we're not going that way. But for engineers working on projects with chartered surveyors as members of the RICS, if the client's getting a whole big lowdown on the surveyor's use of AI, there's a really high chance that they'll be expecting a similar thing from our members. So Panos and Ken are both helping provide really good input on the development of that guide. So at the moment, we're just trying to make it not too kind of like overwhelming, which is where it's looking at the moment. Alrighty, so, oh no, wrong way. Alrighty, so that was just a quick rundown. And so I'm just going to give Panos and Ken an opportunity to give their perspective on their involvement in the AI advisory group. So Panos, we might as well kick off.
Hi there. Yeah. Hi. Ken is here as well.
Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, both great. Over to you.
Cool. So yeah, I guess in my experience so far, it has been quite useful to provide like a little bit more direct usage of AI, because like from an IT engineers or software engineers perspective, I feel that we've been able to be a little bit more hands-on in comparison to the remaining engineering field. So I think it has been useful to kind of see where we are and where the remaining of the profession is, and try to basically help understand what are the fundamentals of how AI systems work, but also kind of push people to kind of adopt it in a little bit more fearless way. It has been great to be able to see this kind of difference in perspective as well, because we also tend to be a little bit caught up in our own bubble. So that has been for me.
Yeah. Thanks for the really great talk. And from my perspective, I work at Auckland University of Technology and I teach on a couple of programs, one of them being the software engineering program. And yeah, I'm very interested in how generative AI can be integrated into our curriculum in a meaningful way. So from my perspective, there's at some point we have to teach engineers, not just software, but engineers in general, the fundamentals of engineering. And then as they grow and understand those fundamentals, they can apply generative AI and other AI tools to help them in their projects. So I think it is a matter of mastering the fundamentals and then understanding where the tools can be applied and what limitations, what are the ethics involved in using those tools. So what I would like to see is our students coming out with those skill sets, those expertise into the industry. Yeah, so that's it for me. How about any more?
I guess I would like to add to just be brave. Use AI, because I think without it, there has been like a shift on how things are done. So people, one way or the other, will have to find a way to adopt it.
Yeah.
So be brave and adopt it sooner than later.
Yeah.
Yeah, are we talking to the converted here, I wonder? Yeah,
But
but
try to convert others in your circles.
Absolutely, and that's a very strong message that we've got from both of you in the advisory group, and what the tone of the message. I know when we were going through the deployment guide, Panos was like, "Oh, you're sounding like you might scare them off with that wording. Let's, let's look at embracing and encouraging." So yeah, really, really excellent feedback we've had. Just to finish off, I just wanted to, click.
Yeah, we'll
Sit down now.
Yeah, thank you.
The question is, is a question coming up? Yes, I just wanted to have this opportunity to say, how can Engineering New Zealand, IT Group is part of Engineering New Zealand, is there anything that you see the program could do on your level? We're looking at very much people starting out, providing resources, but we also recognise that there might be something that we could do to support the IT group and where you are.
I rushed to sit down, I guess. I think what we could be doing is have some section that is, I guess, more targeted to software engineering, because there is a little bit of a deviation. So other engineering fields cannot as easily use AI tools for engineering, design, and even construction. And this is what we tend to do, right? So the way that we build software has changed. So in many occasions, we do not even write code anymore. Like, we just have an active discussion with something like Cursor AI, and it does the work for us. So there's a big shift in how we are doing software engineering versus many of the other engineering fields. They're using AI as a means to improve their processes that sit to the side of engineering design. But we do engineering design directly with AI. So that could be like a little bit of something worthwhile highlighting in the engineering AI material.
There's also the very closely related problems of system architecture and configuration, where now what would be ideal is if we could use artificial intelligence to help us to configure very complex software to satisfy certain requirements, either when we're designing it, when it's initialized, and also at runtime. So we're getting more into using these sorts of artificial intelligence technologies for self-adaptive systems, and being able to dynamically change systems as they are running and experience some sort of change in their environment that requires a reconfiguration. So all of those things, used in the right way, they could mean really responsive and robust software technologies that we would rely on.
So I guess preach some of these things.
Yeah. Well, the good news is both of you are on the committee, so it looks like some work for you guys to get stuck into in the new year. Yes.
Or maybe we can convince other people to preach. Yes.
Yeah. I'll come and stand. It's not hard. So the question. So I've been working with the Agentics Foundation, which is started up in the US and just started here in the last month or so. And one of the phrases that has been bandied about is agentic engineering. So how do you engineer the environment around AI agents? And it's the kind of, how do we not vibe code, right? Because there seems to be a whole bunch of people vibe coding, and like C-suite people vibe coding solutions which are horrific, and it's because they're badly engineered. And so we want to use agents, and we want that framing of it being an engineered solution rather than a vibe coded solution. So we want the quality of engineering, but then it's how do we get accredited as agentic engineers, because we're following the kind of engineering methodologies and the quality, and having some way to prove that quality, and have a certification as an engineer that uses agents rather than just a vibe coder who's a CEO and just throws something together. That's the question.
Yeah, no, very good question. And that kind of, as you're taking your thunder there. I mean, and again, the name of the group, IT group, and the almost licensing of the term software engineer or cybersecurity engineer, or hey, you can call yourself anything. It was quite interesting because I went to a talk we have at the moment someone from Engineers Canada, who is seconding to us at the moment, and he talked about their regulation industry and how the word engineer is licensed in Canada except for software engineers. So he said that you can call yourself a software engineer, you can have a JD as a software engineer, but you cannot do software engineering if you're not licensed software engineer. It was very, very confusing. He completely, yeah. So it's almost like, say, if there was a safety, say, if you were coding for traffic lights, obviously you want some kind of security that the person that's doing that is accredited and off you go. But yeah, it's the only exception, which is interesting. I don't know whether there's going to be any discussion on the name of the IT group, but yeah, no, so you're talking about, but then how would you, if cybersecurity engineers, software engineers isn't a recognized kind of accredited term, then what's the difference with agentic? Isn't that just kind of falling into the other?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's effortless.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Code was effortful, and so if people could make something that looked good, they had to have put quite a bit of effort into it. But now it's become effortless to produce something that looks good but is shit underneath.
Yeah.
We might need to say, okay, we relied on the challenge of getting things working as our guarantee of quality.
Yeah.
And that's gone.
Right.
So we might actually have to lean into a trust scenario where trust is being completely obliterated by AI coding. And so we have to find ways to rebuild that trust in software. But
and does that roll into the verification part of the process as well?
Yeah.
So any piece of software, how is it verified that it works correctly? So is that when the rubbish is kind of discovered and the lid's taken off?
Yeah. So if you're working for developing health IT, so in New Zealand it's different, but in the UK, getting Class 1 certified, you've got to document processes, you've got to have you've got to have your risk register for each of the parts of the code, and you've got to document your process all the way through, which is why it's really hard to retrofit, because of course the standards are you have to have been documenting your process, and if you don't document process, we can't trust you. So all of that is kind of where we start having to rebuild trust. And yeah, I think that's what engineering might have as its value is finding a way of building trust when you can't use previous proxies for trust.
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. Definitely something we can have a really good think about. Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody online? No questions online. Well, I think then we'll close it up right on 6 p.m. Thank you, Ken and Panos, for your contributions. And I will hand over to JD. And unfortunately, I can't stay. I can't stay. I have to rush away to teach a karate class. So there you go.
You could enjoy. Thanks. Bye.
All right.
No one's going to stop her.
Just give me a moment to connect up my laptop with the presentation, folks. So have a minute to chat amongst yourselves. Yep.
More pizza and more drinks.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that question was that we need still good education and good accreditation such that people do not exit with fake degrees. I think this goes to the core of what you were saying earlier.
It's the foundations, understanding those foundations and the limitations of the tools.
Ooh. Okay. Hopefully that is visible to everybody online and in Auckland.
Yes.
All that. And it's lovely to see you again, Panos. Thank you for the invite to come along and have a bit of a chat with everybody tonight.
Good to see you.
Before I break into it, isn't it hilarious that Standards New Zealand doesn't want anything to go into AI? It's like owned by MB, and like the world's, the least effective organization is government. So we should follow their lead on doing the dumbest shit possible. Anyway, so let's have a look at our actual agenda. Firstly, a bit of an introduction on me, and then I'm going to tell a bit of a story about how we've evolved our development approach at Raygun/AutoHive, which Panos might be able to contribute to because he was running our engineering team through part of this time as well. So I'm going to walk through that, and even just off some of the conversations before we kicked off tonight, hearing really interesting ways that other people are doing this. So please don't take what I'm talking about tonight as the definitive answer. And I think that challenge when it does come to the education pieces, the pace of change is just ungodly fast. And how do we actually handle that, I think is the actual rub of the question, not necessarily like how do we run an exam or how do we mark these things. It's like how do we handle the pace? And I'll talk a little bit through some of the human factors, things that we've been seeing with our team, and share some final thoughts. I do have a couple of small demo bits, but this is largely a conversation piece in here. So a little bit about me, in case actually didn't buy a clicker not to use it. So there we go, like a pro. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Raygun and AutoHive. One of my best lecturers is sitting right here when I went to university. So, quality of the work, look to him. But I am a techie at heart. So as much as I am wearing my CEO hat during the week, I enjoy doing R&D and coding and stuff. And I was joking earlier that I tell our engineers that they have the job that I want one day. So one day I'll be back on the tools. I have, however, been building businesses for 19 years across various different domains. Within New Zealand, the one that's usually best known is actually Give a Little. But Raygun has been going for the last sort of decade or so. That's a 93% export-based business. So we don't typically market it heavily here. And then AutoHive is a new AI-first company that we're building. In effect, I would go and do my weekend time playing with these coding tools. And I was like, man, these are amazing. Like I can fly, I can get all of this stuff done. And then I'd go to work, put on my CEO hat, and it's like, Gemini can summarize this email. And I'm like, well, that's not very useful. So AutoHive is a bit of an answer to scratching my own itch of how do we bring really awesome agentic capabilities to the whole organization, not just the software engineers. I live in Wellington here, and I've got a young family, and I used AI to edit the photo. And I've got another little boy coming in April. So looking forward to that. Yeah, another one who can pull JIRA tickets for me in code. No. Anyway.
Congratulations.
I always put this slide into every talk I do on AI, which is we are all at different stages. I know this audience is probably a fair bit more advanced, and I've designed the future slides to acknowledge that. I tell most people that they're not too late, but it is getting awkward, MB. And the biggest thing I believe is a challenge is actually having people reset their prior views on things. So we're all imagining, especially the more experienced we are, the more we see things that no longer exist. And to put it more curtly, I think a lot of the ethics pushback, a lot of the resistance to AI, all of this stuff is simply a projection of, I don't want to learn. Simple as that. And I kind of might sound harsh, but I'm like, the layoffs will continue until curiosity improves, right? So get with the program. But we do want to be supportive, even to the folks that are a little bit more laggy, because nobody is an expert. And normally I say, I'm going to learn something here today by the end that I didn't know when I walked in. Already happened, didn't even start talking. So that's actually, to me, something that it makes this so fun. I was quite a bit younger, obviously, in the past, in the 90s. But that was what I really loved about the internet age, the early ramping of the computing stuff. It was just constantly like, oh, what's this cool new thing? Oh, I can play with this. This is really neat. And so I'm kind of loving just the vibe that's come back into a little bit of this. And so therefore, some of this talk you'll know, especially because we're going to do a bit of a walk through time. Some of it you'll go, oh yeah, okay, that was how we did things 3 years ago. I also want to talk a little bit about the stepping stones. And so I do spend a lot of my time now talking to C-levels and boards of what I call normal businesses, not software teams, talking about things like the governance, how they should roll it out, how they could think about their teams adopting this. And I sort of just say there's 3 levels. Most people are at the level of at least ask an LLM. I'll ask ChatGPT one thing, I'll ask Copilot that. Then you kind of get to the next stage, which is, can I start to do some lightweight automation? Could this run each day? Could this do a research report for me each week on our competitors, that sort of thing? And then this really should be called agentic, but giving the LLM tools, allowing them to use their agency to actually operate, and really starting to try to lean on whatever it is we really mean when we for the intelligence here, letting it have some scope of say. And so I think of it as kind of one-on-one AI. Weirdly, this is not keeping sync with my screen, so I don't know why that is behind this. And oh, did I just drop off the whole connection? Give me 1 sec.
Still there.
Okay.
We can still see you, JD.
You can see me from that, but my computer is not doing the share.
Ah.
So just give me 1 moment. To be fair, while it's doing it, my Wi-Fi actually hooked onto one of the companies downstairs that I've come and pitched AutoHive to. So I suspect that their Wi-Fi might have just got turned off. So it's hooking onto my phone. Exactly. That's what the police tell me. It's all good. We're back in business. Yep. It just falls over if you leave the room. No. No. Cool. That looks like we're back in action. Is that good, Panos?
Yes, we can see.
Excellent. All right. So I ran through these. And really what I was going to say is the top one is really this one-on-one, you work with the machine, and the later stages are more about process and actually putting these things to work. You could start to think of it as collaborative as well. I also wanted to briefly touch on this, but I'm going to be going heavily down the agentic coding route. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about tab completion. Just quickly, this is what my friend Scott Hanselman often refers to as spicy IntelliSense, which is, in the old days coding, put in dot, here's the properties. Now you can kind of go, this is the method signature, and it'll have a good guess. A lot of folks, I've been really surprised, have kind of stuck to that mode. They're using Cursor in that way. Now, I got to be honest, we're going to talk a little bit about the challenge of actually reading the code these agents make. And so in a way, tab completion at least forces you to go through reading things, but it's slow. So it's really about micromanagement at that level. You get more control in general. Versus agentic coding, saying, AI take the wheel. I don't know if any of you saw it. It was only labeled this for a short while, but I really liked when Cursor had the option called YOLO mode. And that was like, just let it run the tools, just let's see how we go. And suddenly my hard drive's formatted. But that is starting to leverage that autonomy and agency elements. Obviously, you still work with the actual code that comes out of it, but we're going to be focusing on that agentic use today. So I thought I'd just walk through the Raygun AI coding journey for folks. And this is really about how our team uses AI coding, not about AI features in Raygun or anything like that, which I will shout out. Panos won an award for an AI thing he put into Raygun. So good work on that one, Panos. So we kicked off, I just thought I'd set a bit of a scene. Back in early 2023, we had an AI week at Raygun. Because it is a subscription service, it means that we do have the benefit that we can effectively stop work all week and we don't lose any money because we get paid anyway. So we just do the customer support in the morning to make sure nobody was let down on that front. And then we spent the whole week just focusing on what we could learn about AI. The first 4 hours of that week, we got everybody in the company to do our engineering hiring test. So, you know, the old days of here's a question, how do you write the code, let's go. And suddenly the operations manager was passing our coding test. She'd never written a line of code in her life. She could just basically paste the question into ChatGPT and say, what would the code look like? Here it is. How do I make it run? Here's how. Absolutely blew the non-engineers' minds, like suddenly going, oh my gosh, this is approachable. Now, obviously, we all know, I'm still not going to promote Vivian into the engineering team because she doesn't really know what it's doing, but she could at least achieve an outcome. And that was across everybody that wasn't writing code. We did provide everybody with a ChatGPT subscription. I always say everyone having fun. The reason for this is I think it's really important when you are trying to drive a learning environment, particularly with adults, but you want it to be enjoyable. The more fun something is, the more those barriers actually come down when people feel it's okay to make a mistake. And I know I was a bit cheesy earlier about, you know, older people not wanting to learn, but there is some truth to that. And part of it is driven by the fear of making mistakes, being seen that you actually know what you're talking about now. All of those things act as a little prison for our mind. And so the more you can make it enjoyable and approachable, the more people will engage with it. And I'll give you, this didn't happen in 2023. This was an example from earlier this year. One of our team moved to the UK. She's a lot of energy, name's Maddie. And the team were really sad, so they built a virtual Maddie agent. And Maddie, the Maddie agent, Maddie bot lives in our Slack now and cheers on team members and writes all sorts. Now, Maddie still works there. She's just 12 hours off, you know. And so, but that was the sort of thing where nobody was like, no, you can't do this. That's, you know, rude and blah, blah, blah. But Maddie thought it was hilarious. Everybody had a good time, and it was a way to build an agent that was just kind of goofy. Like nothing too bad was going to happen. And we started building agents. Now, I put them in quotes here because in 2023, there wasn't a lot out there yet. LangChain was really one of the first things out of the cabs off the rank to have a tinker with. We did have some play arounds with that. Personally, I think one of our broader keys to success in actually building AI-based solutions was that we kind of reset our belief on how complex software should be. So I think that this is actually a common mistake I'm seeing by software developers is, dare I say, the complexity of writing code in the prior 15 years was ridiculous. You know, as I say, React was a cancer on the world. How could we get 7 people to do the work of 1? And all of those sorts of things happened across the industry. And so what happened, and this is what I think happened a bit with LangChain, was it was like, well, the momentum would be that the next thing is equally as complex. And I think that was a mistake. And even though I wasn't planning to talk on it today, the underlying engine that actually runs the agents on AutoHive was largely designed by Panos back in the day. And one of the things that has made that, we have a lot of people who say, but the agents on AutoHive actually work quite reliably. What's your secret? And it's actually, no offense, Panos, it's because it's quite simple. We just dialed it right back and didn't build this elaborate infrastructure around how an agent should work. And we learned some of those lessons back in the day by building these things in the complex way and kind of going, God, how is this ever going to take off if it's this hard? You know, but it was fun to learn. Fast forwarding into later in 2023, we had some crude agents starting to run systems. So I think we had an AdWords analyst at this point. So it would pull the data from our AdWords, look at where money was working, where it wasn't, and would kind of say, hey, move the money over here. Nothing particularly super clever, but at the same time, it meant that we no longer needed our agency that managed our AdWords accounts. And it was replaced with effectively a $2, you know, $3 maybe agent that was running and helping our marketing team. I'm going to dig into this a bit more because just before I finish that first bullet point, this was also what led a wee bit to the creation of AutoHive, because I was starting to see these wins and I'd go out and talk to other people running, whether it's tech companies or not, and they would just say, I don't believe that you're getting anything out of this. It's not happening. It's not happening. And I was like, well, I'm watching it happen and not wanting to sound too full of myself here. There's, you know, you talk about people who own the P&L, and then there's owning the whole damn company and kind of going, no, I can see the benefits. They are very real, and a lot of people are trying to tell me they're not. So we kind of keep leaning in on it. But one of my observations, I mentioned earlier that, I've used the coding tools and kind of go, gosh, why don't we have something as good, for the rest of the team? And that was one observation I had, was that I had really pushed on AI. The start of that 2023 year, I already told our board I wasn't going to rehire anybody who'd left. I told them we needed to build an entirely new product that wouldn't, because I didn't believe that our core business would actually survive the next 10 years with this onslaught, and started shifting the wheels a bit in that direction. But it sort of struck me that why was I seeing this when everybody else was claiming they weren't? And I realized that they had a, somewhat stubborn CEO and founder. I wanted to spend heavily on AI. I had the authority to stop the work for a week, and I started pushing it super hard. And I'll be honest, we churned over quite a few staff in that year. And a lot of them cited the reason for leaving was because I'm so sick and tired of hearing about AI. 2023, God, how are they now? But turned into a huge win for us, because nowadays we have a team that is largely all extremely AI capable, loves AI, and is building an AI first product. Jumping back to agentic coding though, but this is when a friend of mine, Josh Robb, he's the COO of Tend in Auckland, but he also, kind of like myself, while he runs the business side of stuff these days, he's an engineer by trade, he's a software developer. And so he said to me one day, he's like, have you heard about PRDs? I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you've got to start writing these product requirements documents and start feeding them into the AI, because then you can start to achieve much more than one prompt to add something in there. And of course, at the time, what did I do? I think at this point I might have already adopted Claude, was my preference. It was, explain to me what a PRD is. And so I'll jump out and give you a quick example. And I do actually use Claude for this. So I'll give you one from earlier this year. Just turn that off. So in this case, I was working on the workflow system for AutoHive. So one of the things that I sometimes do is I start little projects on that weekend and then show the team on the Monday morning to sort of say, hey, this is where we want to go. And to be honest, I think broadly speaking, at this point, why is everything not a prototype? There's no reason for it not to be a prototype. So you can kind of see here, I ramble on, write me a PRD about this. Here's some things that I want, nothing particularly complicated. And then Claude kind of came back, asked me a few follow-up questions, to which I answered them. And then it spat out this giant markdown document here, which outlined everything that needed to happen. Now, what I would typically do is now take that PRD and fine tune it, like if there's anything in there I disagree with, or I kind of go, actually, we'd use this for our logging, little bits like that. But that PRD really becomes something that sits behind any major feature within the product. And it also becomes part of the living documentation. So a lot of the things that, we were already big monorepo fans at Raygun. It seems like AI has kind of woken everybody up to why that's a good idea. I remain being a big monorepo fan, but now it's helping solve the documentation challenges, because not only can you keep the PRDs in there, but you got to remember that when you make changes to do other work, you can actually ask the AI to simply update the PRD with the current state of the system. And so this has been, in my opinion, a perennial problem, of how do we maintain software documentation that actually matches what the software is doing in there. I'm not going to go too far into that PRD. Suffice it to say, though, I've done things like sit down and go, right, One other win is if you throw on the old dictation software, go in a quiet place and just babble away about whatever the hell it is you want to build. Every idea you have about it, just spit it out. These tools don't typically care that much about the structuring of the information. It can do stuff, but they don't really worry if it's just a complete run-on of your stream of thoughts and then turn that into a PRD. So I've been doing that sort of thing. For example, let's build a PRD for a simple game. I want to ask an agent to then build it, so those sorts of things are really cool. They're also a fun way to sort of explore some AI coding with your kids. Just minimize this.
What level of trust do you have with this? Generally documentation when you refuse before merging, or?
Well, what I would normally do is create the document, and I usually wouldn't actually start the coding necessarily. I would merge it in potentially just as the document with a plan to do it. Then what I'll tend to do is actually aim to implement the entire PRD into a single pull request. Now, there's a second problem there, right? And this is, we were chatting about this earlier. One of the complaints of our team, and it's very real, how much damn code there is to review these days. So the volume has gone through the roof. Doesn't necessarily mean the quality has, and how do we enforce that? So I've got a few slides coming up a bit on that. So I'll just keep this going. Cool. So I already did the side chat. So then we come into like 2024. So we start seeing widespread adoption of these AI coding tools or agentic coding tools. So one of the things that I was doing in early 24 was I had, again, Claude write me a PowerShell script for my sins. I'm a Windows user most of the time. Write me a PowerShell script that would simply concatenate every single C# file in the project, so I could just drop it into the chat and say, right, now I want it to do this feature, and it would kind of go, well, here's the changes, and I would ask it to break out the changes. This obviously had profound problems with context window sizes. You couldn't do too much, but it kind of worked. You could kind of see glimpses of the future in there. And then, of course, Cursor, which, to be fair, may have already been out at this time, and I just hadn't wildly adopted it yet. So Cursor, being able to then go in and start changing the files and not have to load everything in was like a heaven send at this point. And then finally, Claude Code, which I really, really liked initially. I still really like it now. But frequently, because I tend to do a little bit more of R&D's type play, I tend to go back to Cursor because it does let me pick the models. And so, like, you know, Gemini 3 comes out. If I want a really quick play with Gemini 3, I'm going to jump into Cursor and turn it on just to see. But most of our team don't use that anymore. And then it was like, okay, well, how do I make it so that I can handle a much larger or ambitious PRD? So something that's more than, say, a feature, but maybe an entire product. Maybe it's a massive area of an application. And that's where it was to start building a plan off the PRD. And so you'd say, take this PRD and generate a to-do list. This is your file, the agent's file. Please update it as you make progress. Now, when we do the Q&A later, I'll get you to share your story because that was much, much more impressive than this. But at the same time, and I'll just jump back out here. I'll bring this up to show you. So this was a PRD where, sorry, I might need to zoom that in even a bit further for the people online. So this is a nice big long PRD that's about adding full meeting transcription with native system audio recording on various devices to AutoHive because I want to cancel my Granola subscription because it should just be part of our product. So I put that together, and then, as I say, you'd put into the prompt with the agent, you know, given this PRD, I want you to write a to-do list that you are going to manage and track work against. And so it would spit out something like this. Sorry. The meeting recording, incremental implementation plan. It references the original PRD in here as well, and it breaks down the entire project into milestones. And then it goes through and you'll see these here. It's got checkboxes, and you can actually watch as the agent's working, as it's checking these things off, as it's completing the work. And I was like, this to me was an absolute game changer. I was like, suddenly I can manage state. I can handle continuation across runs. I can let the agent pick up where it left off. Even sometimes I would, you know, be halfway through doing something and I think, wouldn't it be cool if we had this feature? Just be like, update the PRD and the to-do list to capture this now. So it could morph those files to just adapt to it. So just to be super clear, I didn't write a single character of this file, didn't write a single character of this file either in there. So I'll just jump back to this guy for a sec. And in 2024, I built a little system called Auto. So one of my weekend projects, and to be super clear, this took a few weekends, but with Claude Code being terminal-based, I started to think, what if I simply built an agent that could run up Docker containers with Claude code inside them, and therefore, and keep in mind this was last year, so the models weren't very clever and were prone to disaster. So you wanted to effectively say, allow all of the tool calls they want to do, just have free reign. I don't even want to be asked, just go bananas, right? But I want the safety of this running inside a container. And so I built Auto as my little home agent that I could start delegating work to and have it figure things out. And I got to be honest, I highly encourage people to try and build something like this because it was a great way to learn a whole lot about how agents work, how you can start thinking about safety, those sorts of things. So agents operating agents. And then I think it was 24 hours after Anthropic announced MCP, which is Model Context Protocol. This is a way to enable agents to have a standardized calling pattern for APIs. We launched one for Raygun so that you could, in effect, query the data out of your Raygun account. For those of you who are unfamiliar, which hopefully is none of you, Raygun predominantly deals with crash reporting data, so errors that are occurring coming into the system. That's why I kind of had to laugh a bit earlier when it was like, well, how are we going to make sure that software is reliable? I'm like, it's fucking not, it's paying my mortgage, the fact it's not. I've also wondered actually if that is why I've been a lot more accommodating of AI mistakes, because when you are on the literal receiving end of billions of everybody else's failures, you kind of don't feel so bad. 2025, so coming into this year, and I really feel like we really hit our stride in 2025. So we start doing, what you'll start to notice is that products, so Cursor, Claude Code, they start to implement features that are effectively PRDs and to-do lists. So when you see planning mode is really just a productization of make me a PRD for what I need to do. And then the to-do lists are just to-do lists. And so one of the things to keep in mind about AI as a general category is that power of the prompt. You don't actually have to wait until products figure out how to productionize these things. You can often just describe to the AI what you want to do, and it can simulate, in fact, do that for you. So as I say, now you no longer need to prompt it, but it is a reminder of the power of the prompt. So then the team began adopting a product called AMP Code. So I bring this up because not very many software developers seem to be familiar with AMP. AMP is a product that has come out of Sourcegraph. So if you're unfamiliar with Sourcegraph, they do a great code search product. They are about 13 years old, and they have actually really deep experience in understanding, therefore, code structures and all this sort of stuff. And so we found that AMP Code is actually, in our opinion, it is still, and it has been now for the whole year almost, the best agentic coding product on the market. They have some really interesting decisions. For example, you cannot pick the model. They're like, no, our focus is on the best, not on you trying to micromanage and twist every knob on the box. It's also 100% usage-based pricing. So there's no $20 plan, there's no $200 plan, there's just like, it's the tokens plus margin, crank it. I've got something on pricing coming up, but to put this in context, our highest throughput developer is spending approximately $1,800 a month on AMP Code. And my best read is he's performing like he's three of himself. And so I sit there thinking, well, I could go and hire 3 more senior engineers, or I could keep spending $1,800 with this guy. I mentioned the pricing. Some of our team do use the other tools still, like Claude and Cursor. I don't mandate the tools. I think it's really important that people feel comfortable with what they're using. And really, sometimes best can be a little bit about how you work with the tool these days as well. We also upgraded the Raygun MCP so that it does remote MCP. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, when MCP first launched, it was the idea that things ran locally. Yeah. So you'd have Claude Code, and if you wanted to hook it up to, say, Raygun, you had to install something locally, and Claude Code would talk to that to talk to Raygun. Remote MCP means you can effectively just give it a URL, and it will go, okay, and we run the little brain part on our server. And to be honest, 99% of the time, it's simply an API wrapper anyway. And so now you can add Raygun to Cursor or Claude with one click. And I got to be honest, like the other night I sat at home and I think in 20 minutes I cleared 15 of the top errors affecting the AutoHive code base, because I'd just be like, go and get the top error and fix it. And I just opened more tabs and gave it the same thing. And it pulls it down, understands the code base, figures out what the error would be, raise it, write a test, and off it goes. So that ability to just, like, again, say, I'm comfortable saying this to you guys, but one of my comments in 2023 was, why does Raygun even exist? Because it shouldn't. Raygun should become an agent that receives a crash report, raises a PR. You never log into it. You never have to do anything. And I think a lot of SaaS products live in that world right now. And so you can kind of see here, this is getting to that point where you'd ask the question, well, why doesn't the Raygun product just effectively execute an agent that raises the PR, JD? And I'll say, I'll see you in 2026. So yeah, the bug time fixing has been reduced immensely. Now, again, engineers, that's not all the bugs at 5 minutes. Sometimes you get something that's really hairy, or you've got to do a full re-architecture of a solution, but most bugs are actually small little things that can be cleaned up. So then you can focus on the chunky stuff. And the model evolution continues to drive quality. So we've obviously had Sonnet, GPT-5, Gemini 3, Opus 4.5. This is a photo of the guy who spends all that money on on AMP. And so in here, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it was 6 coding agents running concurrently, and the others are just normal terminals. And so to be super clear, he would be a highest throughput person using AI. But in general, the expectation now for him is 3 to 5 bug fixes a day. That was pre-MCP, so I need to up that number. And maybe 1 or 2 small features a day, right? So no more. I kind of think it's hilarious to me now when I still hear people talking about 2-week sprints. I'm like, you're just going to lose. Like, it's too slow. So where do I think things are now, and where are we going onwards? So firstly, if you haven't used Opus 4.5 that came out the other day, oh my fucking God, that thing is a boss. It is largely one-shotting just about anything you give it. And even though it's 200K context window, it's priced more than Sonnet, it is actually frequently cheaper than Sonnet because it's smarter about what it pulls into context. And so you save money. Also, if you're like me, and while I'm happy with the people at work spending money on productive things, when I'm doing sort of random play around at home, I don't actually want to spend $1 million. They actually lowered the price on Opus by 2/3 when 4.5 came out. So if you kind of have it in your head that that's the like, I'm going to lose the house sort of model, it's not like that anymore. So check it out. I will tell you just a quick story. I saw that GPT-5 Pro turned up in Cursor, and I was like, and I really like GPT-5 Pro for non-coding. I quite often use it when I'm writing angry letters. And so I thought I'd toggle it on to try it out, and I get this little pop-up in Cursor, and it's like, hey, you've hit your spend limit. And I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. I'll put it up another $100. And it's like, hey, you've hit your spend limit. And I was like, this must be a bug, right? So I go and look at the Cursor UI, and I was like, looking at it, I'm like, I'd only spent like $2.11, on that request. And then because I'd only asked one thing, right? And then I realized it was a wall of $2 requests, and every turn of the agent was $2. So it hadn't even completed the work, and it had eaten about $150 of spend. So thank God I didn't have the global spend budget and just a per user one. But yeah, so don't do what I did there. So yeah, do try out Opus 4.5. Claude Code is a great way to test that out as well. In fact, AMP have now changed their primary model to Opus 4.5. So because they don't let you pick the model necessarily, and we'll come to what that is, that also means that when a new major one comes out, they tend to adapt it if it is actually an improvement. It doesn't make a whole lot of random other changes. It doesn't do needless edits everywhere. There's no comment. I had one the other day, and I got to be honest, I like Gemini 3, It spat out this piece of code, and it iterated through this collection. And inside of the braces of the iterator, it only had a comment that was telling me that type conversion was expensive. And I was like, what? Why did you even put this loop in here? Anyway, Opus is very efficient at figuring out what it needs to know, so it's not that expensive. But multi-agent architectures are starting to become increasingly common. So you see this a wee bit. If you want simple multi-agent architectures, you'll see this in Claude Code. So you might say, I want to go and build these 5 features, or I want you to do these 3 bug fixes. And you'll see it spin up, say, 3 sub-agents. But they're just Claude calling Claude. They're not really anything particularly unique in that regard. They do obviously have their own context window, avoid pollution, etc., that sort of thing, which is good. But this, again, is where AMP code gets really cool, because even though you can't pick the model, they have these, like, they're slowly creating these like characters you can talk about in your message. So if you ask it to consult the Oracle, it will elevate that to a query that will go to GPT-5. And so they would do things like, you jump in, and rather than, say, writing a PRD, you might say, I want to do this feature and I want you to consult the Oracle on how to do it. And so it will go off and use that model, which is slower, but more thorough, but more expensive, come back with the plan, and then until they just change to 4.5, it would then get Sonnet to go through and make the actual code changes. They've also recently added the librarian, and they also have Clicky. The librarian is really cool because you can do things like, say, consult the librarian on this code repository and give it a GitHub link, and it will then go and research that project and be able to effectively act as a reference expert for you on that project. So I've done things like, for example, if I'm working on a feature or a piece of code, and I know there's an open source product that does something really well, or it's doing it a lot better than I'm thinking about, I might go, hey, use the librarian to go and review this, and now write me a PRD that would level up my thing to meet the capabilities of this using the approaches they're discussing, and sort of go and do that. Clicky is the one that will run the browser for you, do browser testing, those sorts of things. And I kind of like it, it works pretty well overall. And while I don't particularly use Auto anymore at home, when I did try and build that, it could do some work, but it wasn't reliable enough yet. But I think we're going to see that idea of fleets and fleets of coding agents operating with effectively software developer managers over the top of it. I like to joke that a lot of ICs, individual contributors, are discovering actually that management is quite hard, and explaining what you want in clear terms is actually quite a skill. And so they're all getting better at that now as well. But I think we're going to see that really kick into high scale next year. Obviously, Codex lets you kind of say, hey, I want to do N number of these things in there. And then I was running through this with somebody at work. I said, what do you think about this? And he said, well, you didn't mention Copilot. I said, well, what about Copilot, JD? I said, well, I think of it as Cursor 6 months ago. So it's really fun watching the Microsoft guys on Twitter pretend they're really excited about cloning yet another feature from something that took them 6 months to build. But if you're using Copilot, stop self-harming and go and get a decent tool. So agent harnesses. I want to talk about this a bit, but I can't really demonstrate it super well. So it's a bit of a concept here. But it's why the model isn't the only important part when you come to agentic coding. So in effect, in this example that I had, now it's a little bit dated, and this is a great, I think these guys asked me to do this talk like end of last week. So, since then, Opus 4.5's come out. This is already out of date. So anyway, Claude Code and AMP Code used to use Sonnet by default. But how is AMP better if they're the same model? And that's where the agent's harness comes in. And this is the piece where, in effect, you can imagine like their system prompt. So they will typically handle their own context window much more smartly. So we all know you've only got a limited amount of space for the context window. So it's really important what you put in there so that it makes the most sense. And the way that I typically describe anything when it comes to managing the context windows, I tend to think of it as the set of constraints that is controlling the cone of possible outcomes. What I've seen from software developers who really struggle with AI is where they want that cone to be so tight that it's almost the exact characters they would have pressed on the keyboard. And you also don't want to go the full vibe code side. And I think this is what we see with, let's say, non-software developers who actually use these tools, is they're a little bit more like the cone is super wide and they don't realize that it's full of bugs or security issues. Those sorts of things. To be honest, though, which one of those is going to be easier to solve? It's going to be easier to simply add checks for the noob user. So like, let's not get too high on our own supply there. They can also have smarter tools. So this is something I'd never actually heard about. I didn't realize there was like 3 million builds of grep in the world. I knew of grep. And then it was like, oh, did you know there's AST grep that actually understands the code structure? And there's like regex grep, and there's all these other ones. Some of them are fast, some of them are slow. There's like a million types of grep. So sometimes what are the default tools that they've actually given to their harness can also make a change to what's going into their context window on how smart it is. Smarter context window compaction. It's been interesting to see this turn up in Claude Code recently, because I've noticed that their compaction is really slow. But to be honest, it makes me think that therefore it's probably because they're spending a lot more cycles figuring out what's actually important to put in there, rather than just, hey, summarize this block in half. You know, they're being a bit more clever, is my hunch. And then that ability to then use multiple models where it makes sense. So as I mentioned, the Oracle within AMP code. So all of these things can actually create quite a bit of a step change. This is actually one of the arguments against Cursor, is the belief that Cursor doesn't have or hasn't built a harness per model. It's that they have one harness and they kind of work with a couple of models the most. And then if you then do like I did and jump in and pick Gemini 3 on day one, you're probably not actually getting the best Gemini 3 experience yet, because nobody's really run it through that harness yet. And that's the argument that the AMP folks make, is they're sort of saying, hey, we spend a lot of time on the harness because it actually really matters to people. And so remember, the context steers the model, therefore PRD, to-do lists, and all of that helps set the direction fairly well. Another thing to consider is closing the loop for longer runs. So as I say, I tend to do most of my stuff on the weekends. And I mentioned I've got a little son, and I clearly had the time to make a second one. So I quite like letting the agent run as long as possible, because there's likelihood is that I'm going to go and kick something off on the computer and then I'm going to be pulled away for half an hour. So if it actually can sit there grinding away on something for half an hour, all the better. And so been doing this one a while, but just prompting it to then build the code at the end. So if you've got a compiled language, this is also why dynamic languages suck, because you've got another fitness test that you can actually put into a compiled language. So does it actually compile? And then of course you can say, but run the tests and ensure they pass. And that's where at times that agency is really good, because, you know, oh, the test failed. Oh, what am I going to have to do to actually fix the test to make it pass? This is also the risk area though, because it's where it goes, oh, well, I'll just comment the test out. Hey, it passes. You know, so sometimes they do really act like intern developers. But you can start to think about, where is the human time going? Where can I find the opportunities to let the agent continue to take on more of the process? And so that again, just put it in the prompt. And one of the things I keep finding, and this actually applies broadly to even the design of agents themselves, is the core fundamentals of software engineering still apply in the AI world. You know, an agent that does one task and does it really well is better put together with others than trying to make one God agent that can do it all. It's just the same as human beings. You can't really expect it to do absolutely everything and do a great job. And that is where multi-agent architectures, I think, are going to take off in 2026. So I'll give you an example on AutoHive. It's not uncommon for people to say, I would like, you know, an agent for all of my staff that is a brilliant executive assistant that can do anything they ask. And I think to myself, man, if I had that, I'd sell it to Apple for like $1 trillion because Siri still can't even play a song, right? So what would you actually do to build that though? And so a lot of people would think, well, I'd build an agent that, you are an expert assistant. The reality is you'd probably build like an email triaging agent, a calendar management agent, a Slack agent, and then you might put an agent on top that is simply triaging the requests down. So a lot of what we actually know about software development practices absolutely 100% can transfer through in this case. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about these files, agents.md, .claude directories, etc. So these are becoming de facto standard, particularly agents.md for agentic coding tools. It's funnily enough, I do actually remember this from Massey, but I don't think it was your class, Jens, which was, might have been Giovanni's actually. We were talking about standards, and it was like de facto standards and actual standards. De facto standards just being ones that kind of just come about, everybody sort of agrees on it, and they didn't have to go and make little certificates. And so a lot of folks in the agentic coding world have converged on agents.md. And at the moment, I believe Anthropic is the only one that's kind of holding out on trying to do that. And what that does mean is it means that you can start to try different tools more easily. You don't have to go and like make a Claude file. And it provides project or concern, and I say here testing. So you can have multiple agents.md files in different directories. And so an example might be that you might have an agents.md in your main directory that sort of explains what the project does, how to run it, etc. You might have in your test directory how to run the tests, what your testing standards are, how you're going to run test containers, blah, 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 whatever you want in there. You might have one sitting inside your Docker folder explaining how your setup works with that sort of thing. But let's just take a really quick peek. So I just have one here. So this is the one at the moment that we are running for AutoHive. And so you'll see here it's explaining what the build and test commands are, how to run up Docker, those sorts of things. Now, obviously these things it knows, like it technically is in the model that it knows how to build a .NET solution, those sorts of things. But by putting it in here, you're just elevating it so it understands, okay, this is what I'd do in this project here. This here is also partly generated. So a lot of these agentic tools will sort of offer, if they don't see one of these, to make one at the start. I highly, like if there's any part of the stack that you spend some time on as a human, fine tune this file, because every single thing that you do with that agentic coding tool is going to load this into context about what it has to do. I did make one mistake at one point where I had an error in one of these for something else I was working on. This was about 6 months ago, and it took me ages to work it out. But in effect, it led the agent to just constantly like banging its head against the wall, because it believes what it's being told, in effect. And so these come through, and we find we probably update this about quarterly on our projects as a good check. But like I say, you can put one in each folder or each concern, those sorts of things. In there, you could tell it about your PRDs. All of that sort of good stuff can be done. We're almost at the end, folks. So let's just talk a little bit about spend. I've sort of already given you the lead on this. But I talk a little bit with folks about the AI maturity model. And I call it the AI maturity model because you got a jet? That's right. Great to see you, Jens. Take care. I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Take care. Cool. The AI maturity model. I call it the AI maturity model because I originally posted it on Twitter and I wanted to get people mad. So I knew that people would be mad if they thought I was calling them immature, right? And it worked. So $20 a month, you're a beginner, right? And intermediate, that's when you kind of go, oh, those $200 max plans, I can actually see how I'd use them now. Like I can see why I need those tokens. Also, for example, the Claude ones, frequently, I think Opus is only available on the max plans because it will just eat the $20 like nobody's business in there. And then I sort of say senior is when you go to pay as you go. And the reason I call it maturity model rather than tweaking people on Twitter is because as you do see the productivity gains coming from this technology, you very quickly realize, particularly in my position, that you want to you basically use as much AI as you possibly can. Now, I know us as techies love to sit there and nitpick. Well, actually, you know, and obviously a token is not a token is not a token, but broadly speaking, it tracks to productivity. Okay. And I've had people say, oh, you're just going to encourage your developers to write really verbose code. And I'm like, well, I'm not paying them by the KLOC. They're not those sorts of people, you know. And so I see that more as the arguments coming from, frankly, the beginners, right? They're the ones who think that they're going to get all they can eat, you know, AI for $20. And so I totally understand in larger company and whatnot, but I would be encouraging most people in the workplace to be encouraged. If you're a full-time software developer, somewhere around that $200 is probably about right. I do see people who actually run multiple max plans to try and keep up. The problem, one of the other reasons that I'm a big fan of pay-as-you-go is because, and again, this is more of an economic story, but like I remember walking around at work, and it wasn't actually a coding agent, it was Claude. And our VP of marketing was sitting there and she's smashing away at her work, and then it's like, boom, come back in 2 hours when your rate limit's reset. Yeah. What the fuck do I want my executives like sitting there going, well, I guess I'm just not going to keep doing that work for 2 hours because we're not going to spend a few bucks? Like, anyone who is accepting that their business just stops based on the rate limits of an AI company is just huffing gas, as far as I'm concerned. Like, you should be paying. You're being penny smart and pound foolish if your whole team has to jutter along against rate limits. So open the wallet, spend a bit of money. And that was the thing. I was like, we're just going to go for pay as you go because I just don't want to stop. And again, speaking of Twitter, I see non-stop developers talking about hitting rate limits. I'm like, do you know how much you guys cost? Like, unless this is a home project, like, pay the damn money, right? I'll also say AmpCode, just briefly, they do have a great free tier. Doesn't give you the top model, right? But they've actually put in a really interesting new mechanism of putting adverts in there. And I know, we're all like, ads. Got bad news. I'm one of the guys paying for the ads. So it's actually quite clever. What they've done is they've said, based on the prompts, we'll trigger a single text, line ad for people. And so we've kicked off a little experiment with them. We're spending about 25,000 US on it. And it's actually proving really effective because, for example, if somebody is in there working on bug reporting or something with it, those sorts of things, it starts saying, have you checked out Raygun? And where they're going to take that next is the idea that right from within the agentic coding environment, you could say, use it, and it will actually instrument the code, provision the account, and close the loop. So they haven't quite got the close the loop coming, but this sort of stuff is coming where you're going to start seeing AI implementing other products. And I think that my personal view, and I won't spend too long in philosophy corner, but when AI is really, really, really humming years down the track, work is going to be this type of thing that is just happening around us, and it's going to be more like a mesh. It's going to be things that are just activating with one another, and the work is getting done. And I think these things look really crude, but you can kind of see where it's going. I often describe it as I feel like right now with AI, we're at the autoexec.bat and config.sys stages where it's like, even the context window. I remember when you'd play games and you were like, do I unload the CD-ROM driver or the sound driver so I can fit this game in memory? So I'm excited for the future. We are at the final thoughts. That was one of them. In there, I'm happy to do some Q&A. I hope it's taking you guys on a good little bit of a journey here. One of the things that I'd like to do with the Q&A, if we're good for time, is, as I said, no one's an expert. So rather than just asking me questions, which I'm happy to take, I'd love folks to just share some of their tips and tricks. And I'm going to be really pointed here, and I'm just going to give you the mic and say, what was your to-do list example from before? Because it was fascinating.
Okay, so when we were doing agentic work with a friend's colleague, data GP AI tool, when we introduced the to-do list, instead of having just a checklist of cross it off when you're done, introduced a tilde, a question mark, and a check. And so when the agent started, it could start work on an empty thing, and it could continue work on the tilde. And if it saw a question mark, it could create a check mark and finish the work. But it wasn't allowed to create a finish mark in a single run. It had to have the entry of a question mark. So the idea was that you're never done on the run you're on. So you'd have to wait for that second pass. And that way you'd get that fresh context window and where it'd go in and go, oh, I have to check to see if the question marks are actually completed before I can turn them into check marks. And so it just built into the markdown that kind of actually wait, iterate, get someone else, you in the future, to review the code. So yeah, so I found that helped when we're doing codecs, multipass, pull requests. I also do something called nav coding, where you get the idea of because for me, code is a combination of my mental model and the actual code, and bugs are a mismatch often between the code and my mental model of what's supposed to be happening. Simple bugs, it's usually just shifting the code to fit my mental model. But harder bugs, I have to change my mental model to understand what the system is doing or to reshape it. And so instead of just letting the AI run ahead, I would ask for multiple versions and pick the one that fitted my mental model the best. So it would be easier for me to shift my mental model to stay on top of where the code's going. So yeah, so I've got one question, right? Which is like you brought it up partly with your advertising. Currently, Health New Zealand has approved Heidi and another AI scribe. Nothing in our contracts or our agreements with them require any transparency over product placement. So not advertising. So yours is clearly an ad, right? So AMP is doing the right thing and saying ad, right? But if a pharmaceutical company goes to Heidi and says, how about you just up the frequency that our drug name gets used in transcripts of medical appointments? How much do we have to pay you to do that? And because we have no oversight over any of that, and we're not checking any of that, and we have no requirements to tell us that that's happening, we have no idea if pharmaceutical companies doing that. And even more concerning is what if they've got a drug for a diagnosis and they just say, hey, can you just up the diagnosis of that disease because we've got the drug that treats that diagnosis? And so doctors start diagnosing things more frequently because the AI has got product placement built into it. What's your thought on that?
That sounds horrible. I mean, it does sound horrible. But at the flip side, and this is something that I think is fascinating broadly, is it's not like that's not happening now. And so that's the thing. Like I don't want to completely pan the ethics angle, but I do think it is mostly overblown because it requires that you believe that it's not happening now. Right. And so the question becomes, can we make it better? Yeah. This is a bit left field. It's not related to health, but I kind of have this view that people don't really like ads in the first place. So what if we actually did delegate it to take, for example, an AI that does a Google search? Is it really that bad if the ads were in there just like a human was reading it? So it did sway it slightly, but therefore you never actually had to look at the ad. So you felt like you were browsing an ad-free internet because your smart systems were reading those ads. But as it started to know you, it would be like, that's a bullshit thing. I'm not doing that. Actually, this one does. Because, an ad that does resonate, again, I know a lot of us techies believe that advertising doesn't work, but it's actually how we find out about things when it does resonate. But that was one thing where I thought, maybe there's a nice spot in there for, again, non-medical advertising to be a little bit nicer. But yeah, I don't know about the health one. It's a hard problem. Because I'm not even sure that necessarily just pure legislation solves the problem. That's the difficulty.
Yeah, no, my only plan currently would be to
so you'd have a statistical agent
Yeah.
looking at the frequencies of words and the frequencies of just doing that validation at our end.
Yep.
And just, but yeah, that would require, so you basically have to get validated, things aren't being manipulated.
Well, I think that's where it goes a bit, like I say, into the philosophy corner, but I'm very pro privacy, right? And I suspect probably everybody, like, there's that whole, like, once you know how the internet works, you kind of go, geez, I wouldn't use it that way. You know, it's like, why doesn't Mark Zuckerberg let his kids use social media? You know, so I'm pretty pro privacy, but at the same time, we can also see that as this becomes more and more powerful, not only do we potentially want to not be as private, you know, but I think it has to be a bit like closed circuit TV. You know, it's like it shouldn't go everywhere. But to your point, like there's actually value in having an agent that would be analyzing the entire country's health performance. Doesn't mean that you want to necessarily be handing that out to everybody, but if it stayed in one little block and could say, you know what, this country does this, this, and this, and we improve health outcomes 22% over the next 5 years, great. All the KFC shut down. Anyway, any questions from anybody online, Auckland?
I have one if no one else has.
All right, hit us, Panos.
Hi there. Yeah. So regarding closing the loop, I noticed that we can of course get it to compile and check and verify and also do the presumably unit and integration tests. Do you think we can also be closing the loop with doing the equivalent of manual testing via like system tests? Like Cursor has an ability now to spin up a web browser and can do things as well. Is it something that you're doing as well? Or Phil, I presume, whoever was in the picture?
It was Phil on the picture. Yes, so we are doing some of that. I'm just going to shift it. That was actually something while I was putting this together. I was like, you know, there are so many points in here. I was like, I haven't even covered this yet on Agentic Code. I haven't covered this. And then I was like, shit, it's not a 2-hour talk, you know. But yes, so like jumping in here, is it tools and MCPs? Yeah, browser automation. So they do have the browser stuff in there, which is cool. What I've been preferring recently is it will actually detect if Chrome is on your machine and it will drive Chrome directly. So I and some of the team haven't necessarily been using the built-in browser stuff in there, but we have been using their Chrome integration. The other thing to be aware of with Chrome is that they have also added some really cool support around their performance profiling tools and the dev tools. So this is not necessarily in Cursor or one of the agentic coding tools, but what it allows you to do is effectively catch a performance trace and then ask it to basically tell you what you need to do to improve that performance of the web page load, which is a pretty cool use of that. We have been doing it. How do I put it? I haven't found it reliable enough to do what you're talking about in terms of like close the loop to the point where no human actually goes and checks it at all. But I have found it useful for verifying the runtime stuff. So frequently build, test, sure, that might work. But quite a few things these days, again, blame modern JavaScript, happens at runtime. And so you could still have issues there. And so I found it better to almost do it more like a ping check, you know, like load this page once the app has been run up. Less so full-on automation. I think that is coming. Most folks I know that are doing this are still using the Playwright MCP, which, again, I haven't actually used that in too much in anger myself, but I've heard people saying that that's kind of slow, it's pretty clunky, and that's where the Chrome stuff is getting a little bit easier to work with. But yeah, actually I should have put this in the deck, but one of the things that I do, and I do it mostly with Cursor, is about every 2 weeks is go into the settings and just look at every single setting this thing has. It's one upside versus the terminal-based UIs, because they're quite often, like I saw a thing today where it was like Claude's doing 12 days of Christmas similar to AutoHive. We're a day ahead because of New Zealand. But they're like, now if you put a exclamation mark in, it will execute it as a bash command so that it doesn't have to chew up your tokens. I'm like, who's going to figure that out? That's why I find going into Cursor and actually having a look, these guys are kind of keeping pretty much at the same level as everybody else. But that's where you see things like this one's old, but going through and adding in the specialized documentation or references to things that you're using. One of the examples I don't think I've got it installed on my laptop, but one of the ones I quite like using is also the MCP for Perplexity. And the reason that's quite good is because I found if you're working with libraries that are being updated super frequently. And so I'll pick on one, which is like Semantic Kernel from Microsoft. I think it was version 0.14.7 or something. And they were like revving the version every 2 weeks. So every time it would try and code with that, it would screw it up because they were just changing the API so often. And so having the Perplexity one in there to go and get the documentation, write me a documentation file for this particular version, and then it uses that as the instruction is another cool tool. But yeah, are you starting to drive some browser stuff yourself, Panos?
No, because unfortunately, I'm not in a web environment. So in my case, it's building a C++ application, and it's so I always do the manual testing myself so far. But definitely in the unit and integration tests that are C++, yes, this is great. But I'll be looking into talking to the web team that we have here to use this.
Yep. I'm quite keen to see, and most of these suck right now, but the full computer use AIs, because, for example, then you could say, hey, I want you to go and test the C++ app, and it can run the app and use it. My little home projects, I frequently use WPF to make a desktop app. And, I can't then use Chrome for it, and I really want something that can see it, and I really want it to be able to click around. But those computer use things, they're just a bit hit and miss right now. Probably another couple of years away, I think.
Yeah, that might be a game changer when you have these tools that can actually use the application for you more reliably. And to that end, I think, do you think that workflows are going to also become more important? Like a to-do is a type of like an voluntary workflow, but it could be that afterwards they would have to execute specific scenarios. So I'm even imagining in the same way we have agents.md, maybe in the future we'll have workflows.md.
I think that's very possible. I mean, when we built AutoHive, and I don't know if you've seen this in a little while, but we build agents in here, but then you do have the workflows capability. It's been refreshed, damn team shipping too fast. And I'll just talk to this a little bit about in fact, I need to talk a bit about the human factors, but like you can come in here and this is much more of the, hey, I want to like control, the flow, and I want it to be more procedural. I don't want to let the thing just make up its mind on everything. The reason I cite the AutoHive example here, beyond just coding, is that what I'm noticing is that this is kind of the level that most people are at with AI. So they're much more comfortable building a deterministic flow and adding in little bits of agentic capability. I think it gives that sense of I know what's going on, and I can see it, and I can visualize it. And so I think that those workflows, I think when it comes to coding ones, the question, to your precise question, I do think they will probably become product level features. But I don't think you have to wait for that because you could just put it in the agents file or the prompt in there. But talking to people, this is kind of where their mental model is actually at today. I was also just going to touch on briefly. I forgot I put it in the contents, but I didn't say it. The people factor. So I may have made a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment about the people who left because of AI, but the remaining team and the people we've hired since, we have actually resumed hiring. But the thing that I've noticed is that there's two types, obviously more, but two primary types of software developer. Those that really derive their sense of purpose and their satisfaction from how they write code, and those that derive their sense of purpose and satisfaction for what the code is doing for others, like the why of what they do is to make the product and see people use it. And I'm noticing quite generally that the people who tie a lot of their sense of worth to how they write that code are having a really uncomfortable time. They're feeling not great. I don't really know how to. I'm thinking of one team member we've got in particular, and look, to his credit, he knows this is the future. He's not trying to run away from it, but he's clearly not enjoying it, you know. And I've tried everything, well, not everything, but you know, trying a lot of things, because in my mind, you know, a compiler is taking a higher level language and simply turning it into machine code. And while there's not that many compiler errors these days, they do make mistakes. And having him understand that we've simply moved up to being able to do this now in English, and it's going to an intermediate language, which is, say, C# or Java, which is then compiled to another intermediate language and then compiled to machine code. It's just another level of abstraction, but people get pretty locked into where they feel the most powerful. And so working with those people on your team, because like they're frequently, often, some of your more capable people, and it's not that they don't want to learn, it's just where they really feel their value is derived from themselves. And that's going to be a real hard problem across a lot of AI, across more than just the software industry too. And that was my point on the people element. I think we're pretty well past time, so I don't know if I should say goodbye to everybody or what's next.
Is Henry there?
Yep, Andrew's there.
Yeah.
Hello. Oh, we can't even see you on that screen.
The connection.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
Yes. Panos, I believe I'm handing over to Ken at this stage, aren't I?
Yeah. Ken's here. Thank you very much, JD.
Yes.
Just very briefly, thank you very much for attending. Thank you to both of our speakers for the really excellent talks. You will have received a survey email by now talking about that you can leave a review. Do please reach out to us via the email address that's included in that survey email. We'd love to have you guys join the IT engineering technical group. And of course, join our steering committee as part of, to help us have events like this and to plan events like this. And a special thank you to Henry and his team for organizing it. Really appreciate that, Henry, and it's been great. So thank you very much and have a good evening.